for a lot of our Jewish readers, you know, your immigration story and or the immigration story and their knowledge of sweatshops really kind of focuses on the 19th and early 20th century, and then perhaps stops there. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about your experience working in sweatshops in the 90s.
I get this feedback a lot, like, oh, we didn't know that there were sweatshops at all. And of course, I didn't know a New York without sweatshops. So my reality was very different. Um, it is the memories that I have of that room remain visceral. I remember walking in, and it was a room that was quite sizable, and yet it felt like there was no air in it. All of the windows were covered. It smelled like a mix of sweat and rice. There were bugs. And then there were just rows and rows of people hunched over, working, it seemed, endlessly at their machines. And as I write in the book, in that room, there was no night or day. It was the articles before you and the articles to come. And that was all that mattered. And once you kind of slipped into the work at your machine or at your station, it almost felt like you became one of the cogs of that system. And in many ways, it hurt more to stop than to keep going. I talk about in the specific chapter about the sweatshop, where the minute I actually sat straight, stood up, I felt this shooting pain just up and down my back because I had been curled up like that, not even aware of my posture, for anywhere from 8 to 12, 14 hours. But I think in that sweatshop too, there was a sense of agency and hope, because there your survival and your means of living were very tangible, right? If you could get through 10 articles of clothing at the rate that I was being paid, that was 10 cents. And so you could measure out in your day just exactly how well you wanted to survive, how much food you could put on the table, and pace yourself. And when you are in an existence where there's very little agency and very little control, that kind of tangible accountability actually meant a lot. It gave you a sense of hope. And I think that kind of immigrant mentality probably stays with me to this day. I can't quite stay still. I have to keep moving. There seems to be this continued lingering sense that if I stop whatever it is I'm doing, that I will not survive. That experience of being reduced to less than human, to being a clothing producing machine, I think is still somewhere deep in the core of me. And if anyone is curious about the sweatshops, the Tenement Museum in New York City has recreated apartments and rooms from different eras of New York. I don't know if the exhibit they have for the sweatshop is specifically based in the 1990s, but when I went in there, I did an event there last fall, and when I went in, I was shocked. I was like, how did you recreate this? And there were other visitors in there with me, museum visitors, and I actually felt offended. I was like, how dare you all be in there? This is my office. This is where I worked. As a child, there was a station for the free rice, just like I had experienced. Every little detail was just a facet of my living memory. So it is really authentic. It's quite possible that the sweatshops just did not change that much over the years, and that's why that could be so relevant across time. But being in that exhibit brought forth all the more the ways in which that experience still lives on inside me.
And I think it's important to note for maybe some of the people here who haven't read the book that, we're talking about when you were, 7 years old and doing all this, between 7 and 12. So it's sort of amazing all the work you were expected to do as a child.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate in that I had a mother who made everything a game. Like I would watch her cook in the kitchen when I was 5, and she'd be peeling the cucumbers, and I'd be like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, I'm just, scrubbing them clean." And so there was a way in which she turned every chore or task into a game. And so for me, it wasn't so much that I was working. I was like, "Oh, it's a cool perk that I get a penny per article of clothing." This is a hide and seek game that I'm playing. So my job was to cut off loose threads from the pieces of clothing. And my mom's job was to put labels onto her articles of clothing, for which she got 3 cents a piece. And so in my mind, I was playing hide and seek with the thread, and it was just my job to find them all. And that kind of mentality that my mother was able to create and build for me really shielded me a lot from the reality of it. And it wasn't until much later that it clicked into place what I was actually doing and how much worse it could have been if I had been fully aware. But I think some of that also is attributable to the wonders of childhood, where children should just kind of accept what's coming to them and they find a way to make it fun or make it fanciful. And it's the adult editorializing that adds a lot of pain and hardship to those early memories.